Hey everyone, this build's name is Pestilence. Hey everyone, welcome to another build challenge video with me in a van by the river. Again, if you like my series, please like, subscribe, tell a friend, and help give me a bit of a community to keep getting the inspiration to make these videos, where we take off-meta or like very uncommonly used items and find a way to structure a build around them to make them at least S-rank viable. Obviously, they weren't meta, but you'd be surprised at what you can get away with when you actually put some ingenuity behind some of these off-meta parts. Okay, so today I'm going to be focusing on the Moreley, a shoulder-mounted spread bazooka that's notable for its really fast reload of 5 seconds. It also has quite a high direct hit adjustment of 190, but because of the spread pattern, I do find that unless they're point blank, this weapon isn't the greatest as a stagger punish, as you're unlikely to land most of the shells unless they've literally rushed you down. So I think in general you want to use the Moreley as the tool that actually finishes the impact buildup, and then you follow up with your stagger punish of some sort, which is what we're going to be doing with the charged terrorist shot, by the way. But anyways, I just want to chat a little bit about the Moreley as well. So because of the quick reload time, you are incentivized to try to use this again before the stagger has been procced, and you want to try to like use it frequently, although you can't let it fly every time as you are an RJ in this case. You could use this on the tanks and the Tetras more, like letting it fly more freely. But because I'm going to put this on an RJ in order to take advantage of height and shooting downward with the spread pattern, canceling the firing animation frequently is going to be the general idea of this build. It's going to be a permaflight build that rains down the spread bazooka and is constantly canceling the animations after firing a salvo from the Rensetsu and the Harris. So basically every shot you want to be firing and canceling, maybe not every shot, but like most of them, you want to be constantly triggering beep warnings to condition the opponent to either waste their shield charges, waste their dodge charges, or start to get lazy and let it and not do anything. And that's when you can let it fly and usually just outright stagger them with the Moreley as they try to rush through without dodging. If I'm going to make a permaflight sort of rifling build that takes advantage of QB canceling frequently on the Moreley, the first piece of gear that I knew I was going to need was going to be the Gills. The Gills gives you the best QB reload if you are underweight, which this, under the ideal weight, which this build can basically do, as you often will enter what I call like hyper evasion mode. You can purge the Moreley for certain matchups where the Moreley's not going to be worth the risk of using and holding still, and the opponents are going to be looking to exhaust your EN. You'll notice my speed goes up dramatically up to 350, which helps us evade missiles even easier without needing to expend energy. Our QB reload drops down to the 0.3 mark, which gives us very small vulnerability windows given the Gills jet duration is 0.28. It's literally 0.02 seconds of vulnerability, which is much better than even the Alula. And the Gills is also more cost efficient in the air, has better upward thrust and EN consumption, and it's quite useful on the AB thrust. So we can actually shuffle aggressively with our rifling, like fire salvo shuffle when we're chasing down kites and other rifling builds. And so we have a very easy time handling those type of matchups, given our weapon types are well suited to hunting them down. Just a quick note here as well. If you purge it, not only do you get a speed boost and a QB reload, but your EN supply goes up dramatically as well. So there are some matchups you keep the Moreley, some matches you purge it, as is often the case with a lot of off-meta weapons, where they usually have like some sort of weakness that makes them not very reliable. Okay, so Gills is definitely needed. The 20D generators buff to the EN recharge delay has allowed this to become the best permaflight generator, unless they end up fixing the aorta. But you'll notice also with the Rensetsu RF, by the way, I'm just going to make a note, the firing quick charge up and firing animation is really good for holding you still in the air, getting you the energy back, but you don't have to do that. You can also use the Moreley, which is more commonly what you're going to be doing because you're going to be canceling it anyways. But the build can just stay in the air, rifling, raining down on builds that don't have a good answer to it, and if there's like double Zimms or whatever, you're always just shuffling backwards and using it. Another reason I really like the Gills on this build over something like the SPD, by the way, which would give us better backpedal speed, but the Gills has a really cool ability where the reverse joints can take advantage of a back jump and then side dodge in order to dodge attacks that would otherwise catch the SPD. So you can get the distance that comes with the back jump, but not have to be afraid of not having enough QB reload to dodge, say like a follow-up Majestic that they try to chase you down with, or a Harris or whatnot. That QB reload is really handy. Okay, so 20D generator, not only does it have great capacity for when we need to chase down kites, but it also allows us to have one of the best permaflight, like redlining energy regenerations, so we can stay in the air. It really synergizes well with the aggressive amount of EN use that we're going to be using the gills for. From there, the FCS, before the FCS, the Nach core with the new buff to the 20D generator, it can fit the generator now, and the EN recharge delay is short enough, and we do have enough EN supply to make the build still viable without having to purge anything. 3650 is a little bit less energy than you'd need, but the jump distance of the reverse joint leg synergizes nicely with the 20D's regen window anyways. So if I just expend my energy, I'll just show you how quick the bar looks like. You will be looking for opportunities to get your energy back. It's not too long, a little short, but for the matchups where we need a little bit more performance, that's when we purge the Moreley. So as at this point, it's pretty sufficient. Okay, so from there, I had a bit of a dilemma with the FCS. Do I run the WLT with the better medium range assist, or just run the Talbot and soft lock the build? That'll give you a really big lift to the EN supply, which would be nice. However, I did find that, especially with how aggressively this build QBs, it's very hard to maintain soft lock precision. If you're a better player than I am, for sure, run the Talbot, but especially because I'm aiming above them a lot of the times, and like we're constantly alternating and flipping around 180, I found that having hard lock at medium range was a very large asset. However, double Zimms and some double pistol builds that are lightweight, I do sometimes miss the Talbot. I'd rather try to soft lock those though, and then try to soft lock medium range when I'm shooting down on builds. So if you're a better player, definitely run the Talbot, but I think the WLT is much easier to work with. Mine beta legs were pretty simple. There's very rare cases where you end up taking the spring chicken, and we are looking to be hyper evasive, so we got to keep our speed in the 330s in order to be able to dodge missiles without spending energy quite reliably, and just taking advantage of a bit of drop distance when needed. So yeah, mine beta legs were pretty essential. From there, the weapons are pretty self-explanatory, I think. So because we QB, we want burst fire weapons so that our fire rate is not impacted by all of our shuffling. The Harrison Rensetsu, you might be wondering why I didn't run Harris, Etsijin, and then missiles. It's too slow for double Zimmermans and certain shield builds. It won't stagger quick enough. And so running the Harris Rensetsu, the Rensetsu has better impact to cumulative impact ratios compared to the Etsijin, so it performs better against shields. It has a higher burst impact, which allows us to hit a really good burst on top of the Moreley if the Moreley doesn't stagger them. I'll just show you a quick clip of that right now comparing the Etsijins. I did experiment though with running split missiles to shut down assault boosters, and tried the Etsijin Harris. It's just a little too slow. But let me show this clip really quick, showing the advantage of being able to hit a higher burst threshold of just a little over 500 on top of the Moreley. I did want to also mention one important synergy with the Harris and the Rensetsu over something like the Harris and SMG, which is that we are less impactful on our firing rate because of the Gill's extremely short jet duration on its QBs. So because these weapons fire once, then there's a pause, fire, then there's a pause. We can dodge during those pauses without impacting our outgoing firing rate, or at least not too much. And then one other really important note is that as long as you pulled the triggers first, you can start the Moreley and it'll complete the firing animation without interrupting it on the weapons in your hands while the Moreley starts up its charge. So it would look, before I show that, I'll just show you like the Rensetsu and the Harris normal firing rate. So the Rensetsu starts to take the lead. That's what it normally looks like. Now if I were to introduce jumping up into the air, dodging and shooting, you can see that the Harris can get interrupted if you dodge a little too early the second time, but it's very easy to keep your weapons firing very close to their maximum fire rate, whereas something like the Etsijin is going to be very likely interrupted a lot of times between its bursts. And this is even easier to do if you're in a matchup where you needed to purge the Moreley and your QBs are now even faster. So you can actually get very close to the true fire rate of these two weapons. If not, I think this actually is the true fire rate. I don't think I'm actually impacting it at all when I've purged the Moreley. So yeah, you can see why you wouldn't want to be firing a full auto weapon that you're constantly interrupting the fire rate and impacting its listed impact per second and cumulative impact per second and damage per second by accident. a nice advantage of the Rensetsu Harris is you don't need much recoil. The Melander C3s can handle this no problem, and that gives us really good stats on top of the firearm specs, which makes up for the Nach Core's weakness, somewhat. Now just a clip of my friend Rose running this build. She's not shooting the rifles, but this is what it looks like when the Moreley's constantly going off and you're taking rifle rounds. Very psychological and can be a really good way to mitigate people's offense. Like shield users, for example, will slow down the use of their left weapon because they're more worried about parrying some of these potential Moreleys. A really cool advantage of the Gills is that in Assault Boost you don't have your QV reload penalty, so the Gills stays at 0.3 even if we have the Moreley. And this also means that you can shuffle at a very high velocity, even keeping up with the Alula. So the Alula may have a higher thrust, but it can't afford to shuffle because of the high cost most of the time. But with us running the 20D generator, you can see how the shuffling here, if you get the right angle, you have to look a little bit to the side in order to keep moving in a straight path, but you get over 500 velocity, and the capacity really allows you to cover a lot of distance in doing so. This is another reason that I didn't run the SPD, by the way. A, more expensive, and it didn't actually end up getting me any further. Both times I ended off having about 6 pillars there ahead of me before I ran out of battery. So yeah, the Alula just didn't really give me much reason to take the SPD. Or sorry, the Gills didn't give me much reason to take the SPD. Okay, jumping into PvP, here we've got double LRB shields. This thing's a nightmare for lightweights most of the time. And this, fortunately, this opponent doesn't assault boost rush me as much as they ought to. However, that said, if they are closer, that does let me have more opportunities to use the Moreley. I would just say focus on dodging the LRBs until they've used 3 shots. And if they overheat the LRB, that's a great time to go for the Moreley. If they fired 3 shots and they're waiting for cooling, they're unlikely to want to fire the LRB and try to not avoid overheating it, so you got to pick your moments to do it quickly, but you do got to get some in. Aiming downward is also another really good thing to try to, like, making it splash on the ground is another good thing to look for, as the splash can hit behind the shield sometimes. And this is another really good example of a matchup where running the Etsijin just would have been really hurting me here because I'd have to get closer to avoid the Etsijin's deflects, but I'm able to use both rifles here to build up impact at range, and also both rifles have a really good ratio against shields too, which is nice in case they're in this case they're actually running the Iguazu shield, which would be very reliable for blocking, just not parry reduction. However, it would be really annoying against the Etsijin. Okay, up next we're going to look at some orbit builds and just close range impact. The general strategy here is going to be to purge the Moreley and bring the fight up into the air to make the Alula really at a disadvantage for energy, and try to keep the fight outside of 130 meters as much as possible, as they're likely to want to be running either the Abbot or the Talbot, and we want to stay in the Walt, taking advantage of our longer range and the ability to not cause deflects. You'll see just how powerful the Gills is. Once they get in really close against me, you'll see I just shift to Gills QB spam. Watch how evasive even the Etsijin has trouble keeping up with that tiny window of vulnerability. It'll be a little bit later in the fight here, but you'll see in a moment where they get really close to me and I just spam burning out their battery while they try to get some shots in for the moment they have close to me before they have to drop to the ground. I also did forget to mention that you'll see it when I'm doing shuffling. I'm not shooting as much as I should. At this stage, at the end of the fight, I kind of realized, wait a minute, this build can shoot, shuffle, and then it makes such a big difference at the very end of the map. But a little too late for me to take advantage. Here we'll be looking at a double viento, so slower projectile speed, but if they get in close, these can put out a shocking amount of burst impact, and also a cumulative impact builds up quick. So fortunately the Gills is pretty much the best booster to have. I would recommend going hyper evasive mode most of the time against builds like this. I think they keep the Moreley on this one though, just because I figured that the small magazine of the viento would give me more energy opportunities to regenerate, and then the Moreley is really good to shut down if they do rush. I think you could go either way on this kind of matchup. It's just depends on how fragile they are, I guess. If they're pretty fragile, you can keep it. If they're pretty tanky, there's a good chance that every time you use the Moreley, you're gonna take too much impact and get staggered sooner or later. So Harris and SMG combo, very similar to double Etsijin's, mainly just trying to keep it at Harris range so that we can leverage the fact that we have 2 weapons good for that range and they only have 1. When they do get in close, activate the Huxley to start turning the tide and get a rapid buildup of hopefully enough impact to just stagger them outright. And you can make the call on if you want to keep the Moreley or not. Again, it really just depends on your opponent's weapon types, I think, if there's an incentive to use it or not. If they have like shoulder weapons that are going to really punish you though every time you try to hold still, like for example laser drones, there is a good argument to not using the Moreley just because holding still is just such a punishing thing for you to do, and even if you are canceling it, it's still a window for those powerful lasers to hit you hard and make you have to pressure them when you should have the health advantage in this matchup as you've got 2 long range weapons. For Lammergeiers, this weapon payload is a absolute monster. You don't need the Moreley for this matchup because they're so fragile anyways. You're just going to chip them to death with the 2 rifles, and then the Huxley is just more of a extra if you get close. But honestly, you don't even have to. If they're running something like the Coral Missile and the Plasma Rifle, those are very difficult things that require very high skill on your part just because you have to break lock and fly just beside the Coral Missile in order to shrug it off. The Plasma is very hard to dodge. Yeah, that's just this piloting thing. The nice thing about this matchup is you don't actually have to get close to start hitting the Lammergeier, which is what they're kind of dependent on. They really want to make sure you are... they want to make sure that you are not able to hurt them unless you are about to get staggered and they can hammer you. In this case, you'll notice I'm also using height because the Lammergeiers do have a hard time because you control the height of the fight. So he has to choose what height to start hovering at, and I can just play opposite that. Like if he's high, I go low. If he's low, I go high. And it makes it very difficult to set up the Wuerger, for example, if I'm always way above them. And you probably won't really have much trouble with Lammergeiers, to be honest, with this build. Just don't get greedy if they have split missiles on your assault boost. Make sure you kill your assault boost make the split missiles pop in front of you, then reinitiate assault boost to get flying through them so that they lose tracking. If you fly through them and then they deploy and acquire you, then they'll follow you backwards. So that's just, split missiles are one thing you always have to be careful of. This build could assault boost shuffle against certain matchups, but you got to be careful about split missiles. I wanted to show this matchup just because this is probably the worst Tetra to come up against. They just have so much stability, and the plasma is so reliable at hitting the gills in the air. So I guess the best way to dodge the plasma rifle is you have to bait out the shot, let it fire at rate as you dodge. Like if you try to dodge it too early, it'll reacquire you, and even if it doesn't, the splash will still catch you. There's just a really finicky timing with it. There might be a way to assault boost it, I'm not sure, but I don't know it. And what I'm trying to do here is just slowly body him into the corner of the map while taking as little missile damage as possible. Also burning out his battery. Unfortunately, I do a terrible job and just absorb so much of that of the missiles and everything going on. I think in hindsight, I probably would have purged the Moreley just and expect this just to be a difficult matchup, as the Moreley's slowing me down too much, and I need the passive boost speed to dodge missiles without spending energy so often. The double Zimmerman matchup can be really tough too, especially if they have a shield. If they're running melee, it's a little bit more in your favor because you can always go for the charged Harris shot if they're getting too close. Just make sure you've built up a little bit of impact. I'd probably recommend going for the kick into soft locked, kick them, activate soft lock, and release the charged Harris, and then fly away because you need to get space as quickly as possible. I think you should keep the Moreley in this matchup if they don't have a shield as well, because it lets you have a pretty latent threat that they can't just assault boost right through. Although I have seen some finicky hits with the Moreley that seem to do like almost nothing when it should be like a dead-on hit. I'm not sure what's causing that, but long and short of it is this is just going to be a tough matchup because the Zimmermans have way too much cumulative back still, and FromSoft has not gotten the hint yet, despite these being a like kind of brainless meta build since patch 1.00. But come on, FromSoft, we're all waiting, just waiting for you to figure it out.
shoulder ammunition at 50%. AP at 30%.
Alright, for double melee, the Moreley is going to be putting in work here. Ideally, again, aim to set up a bit of a cumulative impact build-up. If you can intercept their melee with a kick into Moreley, that's better, as it'll hold them still and avoid any like Moreley miss-hit registration issues. Although you will trade into like one light pulse plate slash if they're aware of that's what you're going to do. But general idea here is just play the vertical game, because melee hates having to deal with this. I do find it very hard to dodge the like with reverse joints, dodge if you're on the ground, a lot of this stuff, like pulse plays and whatnot, so that might just be a me thing. I'm not sure if it's the timing is slower, like there's a startup, so maybe I need to learn how to dodge earlier, but it is something I've noticed you might come into as well, which is that you can have to adjust your timing for dodging if you're used to playing bipeds or heavies, or like, I don't know what else it is. I think pretty much everything else doesn't have to worry about this issue. So for any tanks that are running trip or quad nukes, like any sort of firing stand stuff, I think you should purge the Moreley. You're going to need the mobility and the hyper evasion and EN supply in order to shrug off a lot of those nukes and make sure you constantly have energy back, because you're not going to be risking going in close anyways. You're just going to be rifling at range. Here I did not have a good start, but I ended up picking it up later here. It's also worth mentioning too, if their weapon, I mean, I don't know if you want to do this or not, but again, if their weapon payload allows it, you could also just pop your pulse on right at the beginning, get a health lead and just wrap them. If they just went overkill on nukes or like double LRBs and stuff like that, while not having the ability to catch up, if they just went 0 missiles.
Ammunition at 50%.
And I'm going to end off on just sort of a fun meme build that I came across, basically a missile kite. Again, just assault boosting and making sure you don't eat those split missiles by accidentally assault boosting through them. You're not going to need the Moreley for lightweights like this that just never move, never hold still. So yeah, just purge it and pay attention to the missiles basically. The rifles should do all the work for you and stuff like this. Anyways, if you guys enjoyed the video, don't forget, like, subscribe, and you know the deal. Tell a friend, leave a comment, all that stuff. Help me get something out of Armored Core in return.